Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. Explore survivor stories. Uncover the hidden truths. Join our X-Cult conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Get a Life podcast. I'm Cheryl Bottenheimer. Many of you know me by my maiden name, Cheryl Hope. Today, joining me is Gilly from the UK. We are both former members of the Exclusive Brethren, now known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. We're also joined by a very special guest, Maria Esguerra. Maria is a psychologist and a former member of the Children of God. Maria also helps run the Olive Leaf Network in Australia. For those that don't know, Olive Leaf Network was originally founded in New Zealand by another ex-PBCC member, Lindy Jacome. Welcome, Gilly, and welcome, Maria. I am truly grateful to the both of you for being here and for being willing to talk about something that is so difficult, but so necessary. Before we begin this episode, I want to say something from the heart. What you're about to hear is a conversation about child sexual abuse. For many people, that's an uncomfortable subject. It's the kind of thing society would rather look away from, change the topic, or pretend doesn't happen. But for survivors, it isn't something that sits neatly in the past. It doesn't stay contained in childhood. It follows you into adulthood in ways most people never see. It can affect how you see yourself, how you trust people, how safe the world feels. It can shape friendships, relationships, and the way you move through life. And for many survivors, there's another weight that sits quietly underneath it all. Shame and guilt that were never theirs to carry in the first place. A lot of survivors spend years wondering if what happened to them counts. They question themselves. They minimize it. They try to make sense of things that were confusing, manipulative, or wrapped up in power and authority that a child could never have understood at the time. And many stay silent for years because speaking about it can mean risking everything. Family, community, belonging, even the belief of the people closest to them. So if you're listening today and this isn't your experience, I'm asking you to listen with compassion. Try to understand that when survivors speak about these things, they are often doing something incredibly difficult. They're breaking silence that may have surrounded them for decades. And if you are a survivor listening to this, I want you to hear something clearly. The confusion you may feel, the anger, the grief, the numbness, none of those things mean there is something wrong with you. They are human responses to something that should never have happened. Today's conversation is about helping people understand what survivors actually carry, often quietly, for a very long time. Before we begin, I also want to acknowledge something important. All three of us here today are survivors of child sexual abuse. That's not something any of us say lightly. It's something that has shaped our lives in ways that are often invisible to the outside world. And it's part of the reason this conversation matters so much to us. Before we get into some of the deeper topics today, I'd really love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit, Maria. For those who may not be familiar with your story, could you share a bit about your background, what it was like growing up in the Children of God, and how that experience eventually led you to the work you do today as a psychologist? And I'm also curious, when you look back on your journey, what first made you realize that helping survivors and understanding trauma was something you wanted to dedicate your life to?
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for having me on, and Gilly. I was just saying it's quite funny how we were trying to start this episode and we kept on saying, "Oh, do it at 3 o'clock in the morning" as little cult survivors. So accommodating, and we finally got there and I'm really, really grateful that we get a chance to talk about such an important subject, and one I think that gets missed a lot in the conversation, and one that is just so incredibly harmful. So myself, I was born in the early 80s in Australia. And I usually say I was born as an Australian, but without any rights and protections that an Australian has. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I was actually the seventh child born in 9 years. And so
Oh,
the
wow.
group that, yeah, the group that I was in, the Children of God, was very well, people call it a sex cult because most of the doctrines were around that. So David Berg, he's it started in Huntington Beach back in 68, 69, and David Berg was a pedophile himself. There's a long history of that, and I suppose he saw like the young people and the hippies. And he thought that, that he would be that preacher there on Huntington Beach, and so I think at the beginning it was quite strict. So he was out there preaching with his young teenagers, and it was quite Christian kind of fundamentalism. Um, and but as he got more power, he started to twist things into his way and using biblical scriptures and to start, I suppose, just rolling out sort of his predilections and things that he could do with absolutely boundaryless. So a big verse that he used to use was it was, all things are lawful, or everything done without law with in love is not a sin, and that sort of stuff. So he'd use that really twisted way of kind
Wow.
of, yeah, and twisting love with sex, and so he had a real push for people to sleep with each other because he tried to break down family bonds. So I've got five different dads to my siblings that we know of, at least. So all the couples were kind of, they called it sharing within each other, or not even couples, like sometimes single mums and stuff. So there was lots and lots of babies being born. There was also flirty fishing, which was religious prostitution, basically. So they'd send the women out. And just think about it. This started as like a fundamentalist sort of Christian group, and then in a few years, it's changed into let's proselytize through sex. And then, of course, there was a lot about children as well, liking sex and it being good and godly and loving. So, so there was a lot of those. It was just boundaryless, basically, and definitely in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of child sexual abuse, and then in fact, it was forced. Sometimes it was even put on a roster. Just crazy stuff you can't even imagine. And then when in the 86, I think they came out with a publication which was like, well, the children aren't liking sex that much. It's got nothing to do with the doctrine. It's got to do with the way you're doing it selfishly. So, how they always twist it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so they did, say that, it was excommunicatable offense, but pedophiles don't just stop doing what they're doing overnight. It's like a sickness. So, and because we all lived communally, so it was very isolationist. No one went to school, no one went to work. We all lived within communes. We moved houses every few months. I can't remember a single address that I grew up in. Um, and it went overseas a lot as well, so kind of missionary based. So yeah, so it's such a crazy, hectic environment, and the world's ending and all that sort of apocalyptic stuff, and the outside world is bad and evil, and so yeah, so it was just like a crazy environment, confusing, and even though they did say not to have sex with kids in 86. Obviously, there was a lot of pedophiles still. They had lots of access because we were all living communally in houses of 100 or so. And it was just a very dangerous place for children. So, in some of the stats with survivors, I think I sent you the study, I think it was 76% plus that had experienced sexual abuse. And that was from the ACEs score, so the Adverse Childhood Experiences score, which is a person over 5 years older than you, and it talks about a lot higher bar than some of the other ones, like the redress scheme and stuff. So, so yeah, so that was a little bit about. So I was a teenager myself when I fell pregnant. So yeah, contraception was banned in the sense that highly shunned. At the beginning, it was completely banned, but it was like, are you going to go for the gold and be in God's full will, or are you going to not and potentially get the punishment? So it was that kind of twisted thing. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, so there was a lot of babies being born all over the place. And I fell pregnant definitely way too young. And so um, and that's another way of being sort of trapped within the group, of course, barefoot and pregnant with no
Hmm.
education or anyone knowledge of the outside world. Um, and my son ended up having meningitis when he was 6 months old in Africa. So we'd gone to Africa as missionaries, and so we were sort of yeah, praying over him, putting olive oil on his head, and he sort of went into seizures and into a coma, and praying in tongues. So this is big things that shaped
Mhm.
my life. Unfortunately, we did manage to get him to the hospital on in time, but he does have an ongoing brain injury. So both my kids have disabilities and struggles. So it was really in my 22 that right after I gave birth to my second son, and I was just like, I'm done here. I think it
Yeah.
was the fear for my children and the knowledge of that just a very unsafe environment for them, and that I was sacrificing their life for this cause that I didn't really believe in. I mean, I didn't have the opportunity or the wherewithal to even be like, whoa, this is, the world's not ending, blah, blah, blah. I couldn't deconstruct and that sort of stuff. I just was like tired, exhausted, had hemorrhaged. My son's sitting there with a brain injury. The other one's like, quite unwell. And I was just like, I'm out of here. So
Wow.
yeah, I would say I was really fortunate. My husband, it's like the bookshelf of just things and then it breaks. My husband and I had the bookshelf moment at the same time where we were just like, let's get the fuck out of here. So
Yeah, good.
I'm hoping I'm allowed
Wow.
to swear on this show.
Oh, yes. This show is very, very swear friendly.
Okay, good. Yes. So, yeah, so I was very fortunate we left at the same time. I think that was very protective because I mean, I see all the time with exclusive brethren, it's very isolationist and the way they shun
Mhm.
people and it's just so tragic and it was the same as well and the group that I grew up in that if you left you were in the darkness or what did they call it? Vandari, with demons and blood coming out of your face. Like there was literally all this stuff. So the second you were sort of had left, you became a demon. So
Wow.
yeah, so it was pretty scary experience, but yeah, we worked really hard and we hustled and we still hustle. We still have massive challenges from the parents, our parents' decisions as teenagers. And but we're alive. We get out of bed every day. So and now it was 20 years until I even brought up my background. Decult was a big part of that, and just kind of spoke publicly for the first time at Decult on the Kids in Cult panel, and which was a massive roller coaster. And um, so that's sort of led me to here now, taking on directorship of the Olive Leaf Network. Lindy's a wonderful person.
She really is,
And
isn't she? Yeah.
yeah, she's amazing. She's very level-headed as well.
Mhm.
Because I could get sort of more intense about things just because I do know how dangerous and harmful, especially child abuse, especially like the
Mhm.
worst childhood experiences are. So if we can stop them before they happen, like there's this feel like this real urgency to that. Um, and we did an inquiry. There's an inquiry into cults and fringe groups. I think you might have mentioned on your show in Victoria, and so we've put in submissions for that, and we did a live hearing, myself and Miriam, who's the other director, and she was born and raised in Scientology. So we have very similar experiences. So yeah, so that's what that leads me up to now, and of course a billion more things on the journey. But but yes, we're trying to make change if we can, and it's been I'll be honest, it's been a slog. It's not for the
Mm-hmm.
faint-hearted. I'm sure
No, it
you know.
really isn't, is it?
No. And I totally don't judge anyone that's like, I don't even want to think about this again. I just want peace. And yeah, I totally don't judge them. And I probably will get to that point myself. I think
Mhm.
I'm almost ready to retire
Yeah.
from this space. But if we can do something, it's pretty amazing, even just to hear the government say the word cult and you have an
Hmm. Hmm.
inquiry into that.
Hmm.
So if we can do something just to for them to see how dangerous these environments are, what they look like, because they look very different to what they think they do.
Hmm.
The fact that no one will ever report. They keep on saying, "Oh, we're going to put more laws in." It's like no one in a cult will report ever.
No.
You need to realize you need external eyes and ears in there. You need mandatory reporters, and
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I guess Miriam and I have a very specific focus, and it's, I mean, there's a bit of a whataboutism. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, why aren't you this and that and the other?" And it's like, well, you can't cover everything all
No,
the
and
time.
everybody, and I do think that's really super important to point out that everybody takes a piece of the pie. We can get this done, right? I mean, when I
Mhm.
watched you and Miriam presenting, I mean, it was, this is when I really realized that I wanted you to do this podcast with me because it was here you are sitting at this table. You're a psychologist. You're also a survivor. But it was the heartfelt vulnerability that you showed in that moment where like Gil and I have been talking about this podcast for months and months and trying to figure out who to put in this chair. And when I knew when I watched that, it's her. Called Gilly. I'm like, it's Maria. We
Oh,
have to get Maria to do this. It's just so important to be able to, when we're delivering a podcast that we're about to deliver, to be able to not necessarily come from a textbook. We want to draw that off of, I mean, I want your brain on this podcast and all your expertise that you have, but it was your heart. It was the heart that you had at sitting at that table where, and the questions that you asked and the persistence that you had with, no, we need to stop this before it starts. And getting laws into place isn't going to fix this whole entire thing because we're in the same situation as what you would have been in, right? We can sit
mhm.
there and talk about this till we're blue in the face, make laws until we're blue in the face. The thing is if the people inside a closed sect, hydroman religious group, cult, whatever you want to call it, that this is going on, those people are not going to offer up their pedophiles just like that because there's a law in place. It's just not going to happen.
Absolutely. I think that's true because it's that sort of protect the organization at all cost, like the
Yeah.
doctrine over person. They don't really care about the individual people. The ends justify the means, all of
Hmm.
those kind of clinical terms where it's like, well, if we have to shut up a few survivors, this mission is so much more important than that.
Yeah.
And we see that in the really high control. And I mean, the Royal Commission into responses to child sexual abuse showed the Jehovah's Witness had
Hmm.
1,800 cases that had not been taken to the police. Not a zero of them have, and it's not really changed. Um, it seems, and then we see this in so many of these different organizations, and just recently the 2x2s sent out some paperwork to both the survivors of sexual abuse but also to the perpetrators in the same email saying like kind of putting them in the same sort of as a victim, if you're struggling with this you can reach out. And it really was like a strategy for containment as well. It was like
Hmm.
go externally. It wasn't like we don't want to know about it, we don't want to hear about it, but then it's just so incredibly inappropriate to address both the perpetrators and the victims in the same said like as if it's the same thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of this. It's like a stumbling block, or there's a lot of these terms that cults use, the loaded language. In our cult, it was called sharing. So sex was called sharing. So can you imagine if you didn't want to do it, you weren't sharing? Like that itself, a loaded term, is like so dangerous. And then if you went to a police or outside person, of course, we were all indoctrinated with extreme fear of the government and the Antichrist soldiers and the police and stuff. But if you said, someone shared with me, like no one's going to do anything about it because, like, well, sharing's not a crime. We didn't even have
Yeah.
words for it. So, for the abuse that we were experiencing, and I think, yeah, a lot of these groups, they use these kind of terms and words that literally stop people from understanding you or what you're talking
Mhm.
about. And they also stop um, they're they're manipulative. They're manipulative
Mhm.
terms already, and and to somehow put the blame on the victim every time. So,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
maybe make them compliant. Yeah.
hmm I like even in my own personal case, I've been in conversation. I had been in conversation between myself and Maple Creek, which was the little town that my abuse happened at. And one of the emails back that I got back was the same thing of like, oh, you know what? When you raised this with your parents, like, however many years ago, we announced it in meeting and we said that if anybody, you go to the authorities, you do this, you do that. And of course, that's not going to happen. It's just this check the
Hmm.
box and it was done. So now we can say it was done. But underneath it all, it's not going to happen. It's the same thing as when the lead investigators or when the police show up at my perpetrator's door. He's never let them in. He's never sat down and had a conversation with them. Yet they tell me, oh, well, we encourage everyone to cooperate. Again, loaded language, whereas that's not going to
Yeah.
happen. It's just not going to happen. And in the background, I have audio of like family members saying that they were told not to answer the door. They were told not to do this
Mhm.
stuff. Like what goes on behind the door versus what they present to, in this case, the
Yes,
assembly it doesn't match up. So
of course.
we really, really have to keep fighting and exposing this. And I do think in this podcast today, it is really going to we want to lay out what does this even look like? So I guess one of the first things that I would like to start with is like laying groundwork for our listeners, because a lot of survivors struggle for years with a very basic question. Does what happened to me actually count as abuse, especially when there wasn't obvious violence or when the situation involved grooming, manipulation, authority figures, or religious pressure? From a psychological and clinical perspective, how do professionals actually define child sexual abuse? And what are some of the common misconceptions people have about what abuse looks like? Particularly if the idea is that it wasn't physical force, then it wasn't abuse.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll just comment on your the thing that the exclusive brethren or the Peebs or whatever sent out the other day. I had a rage attack, as I do. My heart was like just to like, even though they said, "Oh, we are cooperating," blah blah blah, but they were like, oh, I can't remember the words they used, so I
Yeah.
don't want to get this
You can
wrong.
paraphrase.
I'll paraphrase. It was something to the effect
Yeah.
that that it was denied, or the perpetrator didn't sort of come forward or something. We asked him and it was denied, and if it was, then we would. And I was like, what the? In what world is the perpetrator going to be like, oh yeah, I did that? So it's just so incredibly like inappropriate for them to say, well, if it happened, we'd do that, Well, if
hmm
there was like proof of it, or if the perpetrator said that they did it, I was like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, Lindy and I had a massive chat about that. Um, so yes, I just it's crazy. In
hmm
Australia, I mean, we've got 24 hours. If we hear about child sexual abuse, we've got 24 hours to report it to the authorities. So there's absolutely no sort of wishy-washy, maybe, who knows, whatever. Um, but I think yeah, what the Royal Commission showed is that a lot of people, particularly in high control institutions, like what the Royal Commission was looking into the institutional responses, I think I think it was like 23 odd years, so I don't know exactly, before someone actually came forward usually and disclosed their
Hmm.
abuse. And that was obviously because there's people in power, people that are frightening, that are usually the ones that are abusing people, that are using that abuse of power. And I think that's really important. But as far as the definition, in Queensland, it's indecent treatment. So that could, be showing child sexual abuse material, or showing children abuse, or like grooming as well as part of that. And then, of course, there's unlawful intercourse as well. So, so that's sort of Queensland, and we have to report even if there's just an allegation or a concern, not proof. And then we've got an affirmative consent model, like even for adults now, where even silence or lack of physical resistance is not a yes. So it really has to be actively communicated through words and actions. So it's made the bar really high. This has just come out recently, the affirmative consent model. Um, and literally, when you read the legislation, it's like, well, it's impossible within these coercive controlling environments to actually have affirmative consent ever, because you're under complete control of this organization. So every sexual interaction is pretty much coercive rape in these groups, until they actually do something about, reducing this insane coercive control over people's lives. Um, the study that I did really focus on the adverse childhood experiences, because I didn't want people to be like, oh, well, then everyone sees, abuse, everyone sees sexual material and stuff. So I focused on that, which is a really high bar, which is a person 5 years plus older than you, and it really talks about some of the actual acts of sexual acts. So 76+%, I think, of my study had actually experienced a very high bar of sexual abuse. And then we've also got the National Redress Scheme, which came out of the Royal Commission, and it's quite broad in the definition. The main thing is you have to have been under 18, you've had to have been under the control of an organization. Yeah, I think it is more broadly. So technically, our environment where there was a lot of naked material, like all of our material that was coming out was, well, grooming material, and the environment was grooming. We lived with lots of people. We saw lots of sexual interaction. There was a lot of nudity. There was a lot of even if no one technically touched you, is considered sexual
Hmm.
abuse. And we did an inquiry submission for the Children of God survivors, and they've pretty much blacked out all of our childhood reading material. That shows you how
Wow.
extreme it is. Like, it's too
Hmm.
risque for a cult inquiry. So sorry, I laugh sometimes when I'm
Oh, all
so
good.
sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah,
Yeah, no. Hmm.
people tell me that all the time. Why do you laugh
Hmm.
when you're talking about such traumatic things? I'm like, oh, that's my coping
Yeah, it's a
mechanism.
nervous laugh. Yeah.
But
And if we were to take that
yeah.
a little bit, I want to give something more specific here, just for those insiders that might not know what specific things would be included. And so we could say that it concludes a wide range of behaviors such as sexual touching or fondling, sexual
Hmm.
acts of penetration, exposure to sexual acts or pornography, sexual conversations directed at a child,
Hmm.
encouraging or forcing a child to participate in sexual activity, exploitation of a child for sexual gratification. And I do want to just reiterate what you said there about even if someone is exposing themselves to you. So that's what
Hmm.
happened to me at one of the first times with Ellen, was him exposing himself to me. And I know my perpetrator also had part of his propane route taken away from him because of farmers' wives complaining that he was exposing himself to them. So I just
Mhm.
want I want those inside there to know that it's not just
Mhm.
sexual abuse is not just intercourse. It's
Mhm.
not just penetration. There's a wide range of what falls underneath the umbrella of what sexual abuse is.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a really good point. Like to me, even like forced confessions, for young people or teenagers about masturbation or their sexual habits or like that is to me it's sexually
Yes,
assaultive and
absolutely.
I actually like it's beyond grooming. You're sitting with a teenager or a child and you're talking to them about sex, having these super inappropriate conversations. And I know quite a few people that yeah, that have actually that was actually the trigger into the sexual abuse was that, well, I
Hmm.
won't tell anyone about what you've done with your boyfriend or
Hmm.
if you do it to me and luckily you'll get away with it. So they're kind of using that as a manipulative tactic and even like priests like getting young boys to talk about their sexual sins or whatever that are not
Hmm.
sins, and then getting sexually aroused by that, and
Hmm.
that's the catalyst. So inappropriate, it's horribly
Yeah.
inappropriate for an adult to have those conversations. So I think we're trying to get that outlawed. Like how crazy that that's even. I mean, it
Hmm.
already would be. I mean, it would be, but obviously no one reports, and there's just so many areas where I suppose, yeah, even in more mainstream groups that they're talking all the time about sexual acts and things. So yeah, I think it's really important for people to know that it's very broad, the
Hmm.
definition and if if it's harmed you, if you're and sometimes like you were saying even the numbing and stuff that can be a strategy too, like where you feel almost numb about it. Yeah, one of my favorite books is Educated. I don't know if you've read it, Tara Westover.
Hmm. No, I
Oh, it's such
haven't.
a good book. I would recommend you read it. But yeah, there's a beautiful quote. I'll see if I can pull it up, but if not, paraphrasing it is like she talks about her brother, assaulting her, and she said that the not feeling like she thought that she was numb, that was actually she says it much nicer than me. Let me pull it up. She says, I saw myself at unbreakable, tender as a stone. At first, I nearly believed it until it became the truth. Then I was able to tell myself that he didn't affect me, that nothing affected me. I didn't
Hmm.
understand how morbidly right I was, how I had hollowed myself out. For all my obsessing over the consequences of that night, I had misunderstood the vital truth that it not affecting me, that was its effect.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think it's important too, and I'm gonna get Gilly to talk about this too, is that our bodies have responses. They have physiological responses that you cannot control. And that's where the whole mind fuck comes in, right? Is because you
Mhm.
know what's happened to you is not right, but your body is responding. I actually had a survivor come forward to me and tell me their story, and I was trying to tell the survivor that they needed to report it. And she said to me, she said, but I enjoyed it. And I'm like, but you were way underage. Like this
Mhm.
still does not make it right. And did you really enjoy it, or did your body respond to the stimulation that
Mhm.
you were getting? And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why so many people don't go to the police or don't come forward is because of the mind gaslighting that we do to ourselves because of how our body responds versus what is addressing actually what's happening. And for men, this is really hard on men, especially because they have a
Mhm.
much more physiological response that is happening to them, not diminishing what happens for a female, but for a man, it's just so much more present, right? And that really screws with the mind. I don't know if you want to say anything about that on Gilead, like how that was for you.
Yeah, it was certainly for me. It was certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest, reason why I didn't
Yeah.
come forward with it for such a long time. Because, like you say, and it's something that I've had to learn through therapy, and I think it's something I really, really want to stress to any potential victims or survivors, and explain the difference between the psychological response or what you think is that your body responding in a certain way. Um, that is biological. There is nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
If your
Mhm.
body is stimulated in a way that is, your body will biologically react to it.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean it was you were consenting. Doesn't mean that it was okay, or that you were somehow responsible for it because your body reacted in that way. Absolutely does not. Your body will react that way purely because of the biological reaction that happens naturally. And
Yeah.
it's so important to understand that just because your body reacted that way, whatever way it is, and it, like you say, it might have felt pleasurable, it might have felt good to your body. And especially, that's the other thing on that point is, for a lot of us who were obviously brought up in the Peebs, we were sexual relation, sexual contact was something that we were deprived of. So when your body first feels that way, it's a completely new experience for us. It's something that's we're not used to having. Um, so the fact that your body responds to that does not mean that you are any way responsible. It does not mean that there's a guilt that you've got to carry for that. And I did for years. And that's, like I say, why I didn't come out with it for years, because I thought, well, hang on, I reacted, my body reacted that way. So surely I hold some responsibility for it. No, you do not. It is
Yeah.
absolutely not your responsibility. It's purely down to the way that the biological response that your body
Physiological.
will
Yeah.
automatically
Yeah.
give.
Yeah, absolutely. And that second level of the guilt and the shame and the thinking that it was your fault is another mind fuckery, to use a clinical term, and that's part of the harm as well. And that's a really, really good point. And it doesn't have to be painful, like people think,
Hmm.
getting kicked in the teeth and being pushed on is what's the trauma, but it's the trauma is the use of the power and the control over you and the inability to defend or protect yourself from that. And I think onto that, there's also a lot of people go into freeze mode. So they go into
Hmm.
that dissociation as a survival, and you kind of get kind of numbed out, and it's just so overwhelming for your nervous system. So I've heard survivors say, and I'll just say I never talk about my clients ever, ever, ever. The things that I share are either peers that have been happy for me to share these things
Hmm.
because they're really happy that I'm speaking about these things, or yeah, things that I've heard or read in books from other survivors and publicly shared. Someone saying I raped myself, like blaming themselves because they think that they did it because they didn't say no, but they were groomed to say yes to everything
Hmm.
to this person in power.
Mhm.
And I think that's why the high control environments are so dangerous because they set you up for that. You
Yeah.
have to obey your elders. You have to say yes all the time, saying no, standing up for yourself, having anger, having, assertive skills is all sinful and bad. So they create this kind of environment So when people talk about grooming and even love bombing, I mean, those are the things that you do to people that have power. I mean, or people that have agency. So you're love bombing someone because it's a tool to get them
Yep.
to
Yep.
recruit them. You don't have to love bomb kids. They're already born into the boiled pot. Like you don't have
Yep.
to slowly get them to agree. So, and you don't really have to groom kids in these cults because they're already groomed. It's a grooming environment. So, a lot of times when I read research that is like, oh, and he gave me all these gifts and he da 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 da. And it's
Mm.
like, well, actually, I don't know if that happened to a lot of survivors that I've talked to because already they were groomed to say yes to everything and to be compliant. And so yeah, it's quite a different experience when you've been brought up with that. Yeah, and I'll just add to that kind of dissociation as well, Cheryl, like listening to your story where you said you saw yourself in a mirror and you sort of like was
Mm-hmm.
like a doll, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the depersonalization. So that's kind of when that's a part of dissociation where you kind of step out of your body and you're kind of seeing your
Mm-hmm.
body. And then derealization is another part of dissociation where you kind of everything kind of feels unreal. The
Mm-hmm.
whole world sort of like looks like whoa. Yeah, and that happened to me and the experiences that I had where I was like like my nervous system was so overwhelmed that I didn't even know what was yeah, I was like in dissociated in such another world. You can't possibly consent when you're
Mm-hmm.
dissociated. Like that's actually a technique. So yeah, there's I know people that are grew up in like satanic cults and stuff as well, and a lot of them have dissociative identity disorder. And I would argue actually that most of us have dissociative,
Yeah.
you know, that's like the number one thing that cult survivors have as a symptom when they leave. Yeah, that it's an actual technique to protect the perpetrator. They literally teach you to be in a different sort of dissociative state. So if the police come and question you, you'll be, no, 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 nothing happened.
Mhm.
Like genuinely, you were thinking that because you're in a completely different sort of state as you were when the event happened.
Yeah.
So it's a really protective for them, and that's why they have like multiple different sort of yeah, people fronting, you know, from
Mhm.
there at different times because they've actually been, it's actually called Ramkoa, so ritualized abuse and mind control and organized abuse. So that's what you were experiencing very much so, Cheryl, when you explained what you were experiencing within this
Mhm.
group. That this it was ritualized, and it is very premeditated to break down your psyche and to ensure your obedience. So
Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah.
I remember even when I did my police report, and I'm sure Gilly, you'll be able to, you'll be able to relate to this, is that even when I did my police report, I actually had to really step up my therapy after that. And one area that was just kept coming at me was I felt so guilty for telling
Mm.
on him, right? Like you could feel just the little inner child inside me of like, but we told on him, we told on him, we like, where, you know, you're so programmed not to do that. And when you go to do that, it takes such hard we really have to confront that guilt and that fear of like, I'd have to ask myself every time, why are you still protecting him? He doesn't like, he needs to be held responsible for it. But there's the whole nervous system and the whole body is responding of like, I shouldn't have told him. I told on him. I shouldn't have told on him.
Mm.
I finally told on him. Like, it's just, it's such a hard layer, the layers that you have to go through when you finally start speaking up about this is it is hard. Like it's insane what you go through and what your body goes through and how you're trying to mentally process everything. You don't realize how bad it was until you sit down with it, confront it, report it, and then deal with the aftermath. I mean, now that's been 4 years since I've done that. I'm sitting in a much better position. But I still have this feeling where people are like, Cheryl, why don't you want him in jail? Why don't you want him in jail? And to me, it was because I still have this, my heart still just wants him fixed. Right. And it was the same thing of when it was back in there. It's like he would want to fix me. But in my mind, I'm like, he's the one that needs to be fixed. How can we fix him? I just want to fix him. He needs to be fixed. And I know throwing him in jail is not going to fix him. What's going to fix him, maybe, is if he goes into an institution, someone studies his brain and sees, like, is it possible to actually reverse a sick mind like this? I guess for my whole why in a lot of this is when I die, I want to leave the world at a different place than I came into it. And part of that is, it's not just about throwing things under the rug or throwing people in jail. Yes, they belong in there. They really do. But where are we going to be? How does society make changes? How do we make these massive changes to make this world a more functional world? Because it's so distorted. I mean, we all see the Epstein files coming out. And I've said this before in other podcasts, is that it was as many of the tears that I shed when I was reading and watching that stuff, there was a piece in me that was so freaking relieved that I could finally talk about what really happened to me, because people were not going to come back at me and think, you know what, Cheryl, you are absolutely fucked. Like, I don't believe a word that you're saying. So I watch who I tell what really happened to me. I watch who I talk to it about, because I'm not going to add that judgment and that disbelief already onto my plate that I'm already carrying. But those Epstein files has really allowed for this freedom of starting to really get into what type of evil really exists on this planet. And it is much, much darker than what most people are willing to sit down and acknowledge. But the thing is we cannot make these changes if we don't all sit at a table and literally look at what is sitting there. We can't hide from this anymore. Like, I feel the urgency, Maria, that you feel. I go to bed in it. I wake up in nightmares in it. I wake up in the morning of it. It's like, we have to be honest. We have to start allowing platforms and conversations that veer away from what everybody is competitively talking about and go to the big picture. The big freaking picture is these next generations. It's these freaking children. Like, that is my why, is that I refuse to die and take my last breath knowing that I did not do everything that I possibly could do to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. But it's not just me. I can't just do it. Maria, you can't just do it. Gilly just can't do it. It takes all of us coming together, letting go of our baggage. And I'm talking baggage that doesn't need to be brought to the table. We're not going to get anywhere. We will not get anywhere if we don't come to this table and stay focused on what is written on the table. We have to look at the evil that exists. We have to look at exactly what is happening. Otherwise, what are we doing? Right? I'm not going to sit here and waste my breath and my time day in and day out when I have a life that I could be living. But at the same time, I know when I go to die, I check in with this. Once a week, I check in. Cheryl, if you were to die today, what feels unfinished? That's how I deal. That's literally Friday at the end of my work week. Cheryl, if you were to die right now, how does it feel? What do you feel? And then I start making notes of what doesn't feel right. And I think, Maria, again, I come back just to God, I'm going to cry. Your vulnerability at that parliament was just, it was so fucking refreshing to see a psychologist sit at this table and bare her heart and bare her soul. You were shaking. I saw myself in you. And yet you had a psychologist a name behind your name. And yet you were no different than me. It was just so freaking refreshing to see. And I think that's the type of people that I want to work with. That's the type that I want to sit down at the table with. People that don't, no matter how many letters are behind your name, can still show up in your trauma. You can still show up as this wounded healer, as this wounded psychologist that has so much to freaking give the world. But I'm still going to come bearing
Mm.
the wounds that I have. It is our wounds that literally draw in the wounded. It is not the painted picture. It is not the PhDs that you're bragging about. It is our wounds that bring in the wounded. Sorry, that was
Yeah.
much longer rant than I was
Cheryl.
planning on it, but
I love
you know,
it.
it's just
That
I'm
means so
just
much to me. I felt so like, yeah, I had a massive vulnerability hangover after that.
yeah.
But the reason why I read your poem is because it goes to the heart of it. Like I could rattle off statistics like what we did. There was like, Jill A.B. Mitten research, she's like up to 50+% in Jehovah's Witness and Exclusive Brethren have experienced child sexual abuse. Those numbers are staggering. And so I brought in the statistics and then I talked about, the science behind it and all of the barriers in place and the things that are not there for children in these environments to actually be able to get any support or justice. But then I was like, I have to end with Cheryl's poem. I've read it like dozens of times before, and I just like cried my eyes out every time. So that was actually me holding it together compared to the other times. But yeah, I mean, I just felt such a weight, there's just a weight of all the people that I buried, my loved ones, and the weight of all the stories, the children still inside these environments that every day are being subjected like your family members, The children, yesterday's children, as I said, all of us that have lived through this and there's been no justice and no support and the unfairness of it. And because I work within systems, I see what happens when a child says, "Oh, I've been abused." Okay, their parents are super supportive. They've got a group of people around them offering them care and early intervention. They've got access to justice and this, that, and the other. But all of that is missing. It's like, and that's why the harms just keep happening within these groups, and there's absolutely no accountability.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring in the science behind it, developmental science and all of that. But at the end, I was like, I have to get the hearts going. Like I have to show them what it feels like. What does it feel like? And your poem was just so perfect for that. I think I've asked because we read it in our support groups and I've got a couple support groups we call Friends with Baggage. So yeah, it's just kind of like yeah, it's kind of friends with benefit without the benefit side, with the baggage side. So and everyone had a different line that they absolutely love from your poem, but I don't know why it was the jingling, coins in the pocket. For some reason, that just like got me because it's like this. That's what trauma is. It's not like this one thing. It's like this sensory memory, these
Mhm.
flashbacks. People think of it, a flashback is like remembering the whole thing that happened, but flashbacks are usually sensory based and
Mhm.
they're
Mhm.
a smell, a voice, this, um, yeah, for some
Yeah.
people, sounds or something, even eating can be like, be like a
Yeah.
trigger for them.
Mhm.
So to me, that was just like, whoa, Cheryl has just completely unzipped her body for us and brought this
Mhm.
beautiful, thing. So, and I had so many people after message me and just say that was the first time I allowed myself to just proper ugly cry.
Mhm.
After, it's been 10 years, 20 years since the cult or since the experience, but I just like allowed myself. It was like giving everyone permission to have this like joint experience of this insane grief of not just having it happening, but also not having it believed, having to constantly unzip your trauma constantly and
Yeah.
inside your body to show
Yeah.
what it feels like.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you got lots of people crying. I hope you're happy with yourself.
So Gilly, when you did your police report, like, can you explain to us a little bit about what you went through after you did your police report?
Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's one of those things of you still feel a guilt attached there, because for me personally, obviously my abuser was a close family member, so you're fighting with the reality that they may, if the case goes the way that I hope it does, they may end up, in prison. You're fighting that because you're thinking, I can't do this to a family member. I can't put them in, I can't put them in that position. But I think one of the things I really struggled with afterwards was being so vulnerable and being honest and open, and having to revisit it all in detail. And it's just, you kind of feel like, where does it, obviously you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know whether it's going to go anywhere. And it kind of almost feels like a therapy session without a response. Because obviously there's nothing, there's at that point in time, there's nothing coming back. Obviously you've laid yourself bare, you've completely put everything out there. But it's I think one of the hardest things that people don't realize is what it's taken you to get to that point, and what it's cost you to get to that point. And you can get some really, really unsympathetic responses, and I had a family member turn to me and say, "Oh, do you realize what you're going to put your parents through?" And I think that's one of the hardest things is, and it's probably also comes from from our cult backgrounds, is the guilt that's attached to that, because you straight away go, "Oh shit, I'm doing something wrong. I'm guilty of putting someone else in a difficult position," and not actually allowing yourself to go, "No, this is what you suffered, and this is what you should never have suffered in the first place. So if your parents suffer now because your family member has to go through it, well, they should have been there in the first place to prevent it. They should have been there to protect you." I think that's one of the hardest things for people to understand is, like I say, what it's to have got to that point, to have got to the point of going, right, okay, I'm putting this where it belongs now. This, there is no other place for this to go. And that's why it took it took me years before I decided to go to the police with it, because I thought I could handle it. I thought I could cope with it. I thought I'd deal with it through therapy or whatever else. And it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away until it's confronted. And it still hasn't gone away now, but it's being dealt with. It's being dealt with currently, and you can try. For me personally, at the end of the day, everyone's got to come to their own decision about what they want to do with it. But for me personally, you can try all sorts of ways of dealing with it. But if it's not, because this is something I was thinking when you were speaking earlier, particularly using the peeps as an example, but all cults and high control groups, they won't even call it sexual abuse. They'll call it something immoral. They'll call it, that was immoral. That was something that wasn't right. They won't actually name it for what it is. The same with anything. The same with any other forms of abuse, with it, whether it's domestic abuse or whether it's marital rape or whatever. They won't call it out for what it is, and that's partly why we've been talking about doing this podcast for so long, is because people won't realize that there's probably a load of people in all sorts of environments that they don't realize that they have they are a survivor, they are a victim of sexual abuse or any other form of abuse, because they weren't. It's such a, for in the PEEBs as a whole, the whole subject of sex is such a taboo subject to be discussed openly. So they won't want to discuss it openly, and they won't. And like you were saying earlier, Maria, the whole thing of priests getting young people to confess what they've been doing sexually. That is such an invasion of privacy, but people will be scared not to confess it because they'll be understanding is it's a sin on their behalf, or on their part, and actually not realize what they're being subjected to or what they're being coerced into. Yeah, sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but
Yeah, that's totally right what you're saying. Yeah, and even like terms like stumbling block or something that literally puts the blame on the victim, as like they somehow brought it on and they made that person do that thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up in a sex cult, but it kind of was the same as the purity culture cults, or because it was like two sides of the same coin, really. The strategy was just different. Like your strategy is if something happens to you, it's like you've done this to yourself and you've brought it on, and so yeah, so never ever tempt anyone. There's just like this constant thing. But in our case, it's like, well, you are just tempting people all the time. So just give them what they want. You have to give them what they want all the time. So it was kind of the same thing, but it was still wrapped up in this shame and guilt, and somehow you as the victim had done something to bring that on yourself. And yeah, I like that. Like, this is immoral, or not. This is a sexual assault on you. This is, because that kind of frames both people as doing a bad act rather than one person with power and control over the other, using them, for gratification. And it's really, really tragic. And I think one thing that I found was really interesting is a lot of the I just saw some the other day say, oh, people who've been sexually abused, they're acting out, and there's lots of behavioral issues and all of this kind of like external stuff. And so that's kind of the thing. They wet the bed or regress or tantrums. And for cult survivors or people from, high control religion, it's very different. A lot of times you're quiet, high achieving, terrified for it to get into trouble. Like abusers don't go and abuse someone that they know is going to dob on them. Like
Exactly.
they find someone that is compliant and that's going to do exactly what they want, that's scared and a lot of time, yeah, dissociated. Like they really target particular people. And I think that's where there's a big problem, because people don't know what it looks like in these high control group, what an abuse survivor actually looks like, or someone who is being abused, because they're looking for these outward signs. They're not looking for um, this person that is like overly compliant and never wanting to get into trouble and that sort of stuff. So just like Gloriaville the other day, they've gone in and the and there's nothing to see here. All the kids are wonderful and well adjusted. It's like, well, because they're quiet and silent and they're doing exactly what they're told all the time, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not trauma survivors or they're not going through abuse at the moment. Like there's just such a lack of understanding of what it actually looks like.
That
Yeah, it's
worries me with
interesting.
the PBCC's school. It's called One School Global, and they're rolling out
Mhm.
their OSG Aware program again this April. And I had someone read me off the pamphlet that's been going around, and it's just horrifying at what they are considering education around this stuff, right down to they've included arranged marriages, because of course we have commented on that they have arranged marriages, which they do. Arranged, if you have to have it approved by somebody to say yes or no, that is an arranged marriage. Or if a man calls up a female and says, "Hey, like Bruce Hales has said that I would be a good match for you," that female just says yes,
Can't say
right?
no.
I mean,
Yeah.
you get the very rare one that says no, but then they pay for that. I think it's just so important that somehow a governing authority can't just walk in for one day or
Hmm.
say even for 2 weeks sitting there. There has to be something implemented that is far more intricate than what they think it is that they need to be able to catch these guys. It's not what they think it is. You can't just, because these people will sit there and arrange anything to check off the boxes. But what's really happened behind the scenes is a whole other story. I want to go back to this idea of what sexual abuse looks like. And in the PBCC, they have their motto of women, wives, be subject to your husbands. And so what I wanted to say to those women in the PBCC is that when you are having sex with your husband and it's forced, you don't want to do it, that is considered abuse. That is abuse. Consent is consent. And teaching yourself to ask your body, do I want this? Or am I just doing it because I need to be subject to my husband? That is sexual abuse. Like, you have to be able to have enough agency over your body to be able to listen to it and ask your body, do I really want this? Or am I doing it just because I know I have to give it to my husband? Or I'm keeping the peace, or this, insert whatever it is here. Even if you've been married 30 years, when you have intercourse, it should be completely a mutual thing. But you have to learn what that feels like, because right now you've been told just to give it to him. And I think this is one of the biggest things that I want to say to the PBCC with that their biblical narrative that they use on that is that is abuse. In the real world, that is abuse. And you hear of these stories outside of a high control group of this happening, of like, well, why did you do it? Well, because I knew if I didn't, there would be repercussions. That's abuse. Just need you to understand that is abuse. It should be consensual.
No one outside of your relationship should tell you when you should or shouldn't be having sex.
Yeah. It's
And
funny that we have to
no
say
one
that.
in a relationship,
Yeah, it is.
should be.
Yeah, for sure. And so our affirmative model of consent says there is no consent when a person participates in the act because of force, fear of force, harm of any type, or fear of harm of any type. Participates in the act because of coercion, blackmail, or intimidation. And then participates in the act because the person or the other person is unlawfully confined, detained, or otherwise deprived of their personal liberty, which is an entire cult. And then participates in the act because the person's overborne by the abuse of a relationship of authority, of trust, or dependence. So when you create this environment where a woman is subject to the whims of her husband, and you've got this constant, authority figure saying that you need to comply, husband's the head of the house, all of that. So there's no, I mean, and also if you're dependent, potentially if you're not working, you don't have any money, you're stuck, in the house, you're deprived of your personal liberty. There's no consent. You can't possibly have a consensual consent is control is the opposite of consent, Like, it's just impossible to have consent in that setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to trauma. When you finally get the courage up to talk and to start
Mm.
expressing what's happening to you, and you're met with disbelief. And
Mm.
I really wanted you, Maria, to just talk about what that is like and the harm that does to a survivor.
Absolutely. The traumatic impacts of like not being believed, of a lot of people talk about the court system as like the second rape, because you have to defend and justify and explain yourself over and over again. So absolutely, that can really impact a survivor, especially when you've already got so much fear about talking about someone, you've got all these emotional triggers, and everything's about silence. We grew up in a silent environment where we just don't talk about these things. And so when you finally bring the courage up and then you're being attacked from every side, and sometimes even, therapists
Mhm.
can be harmful. And yeah, I've heard even therapists that are sort of, there's obviously people in the cold apologist space that sort of say that, apostates are just making things up and all of this stuff. And they kind of but then there's also people in the anti-cult space that are like saying, oh, well, they were in a high control group. It's not their fault, blah, blah, blah. So they're kind of perpetrator apologists. So you're getting it from every single side.
Mhm.
You're getting kind of gaslit that it didn't really matter. It didn't really happen. Feel sorry, empathize with your perpetrator. And so we've got it's they're just like from so many areas and levels to be like keep this a secret, stop talking about this. And this is childhood developmental trauma as well, that your whole life you've been told to keep these secrets of your perpetrators. Um, and so there's so many different levels of that being disbelieved, and the harm that it causes to you. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, Judith Herman's work is really good about that, like how it's just so easy for people, to take the side of the perpetrator because all they ask is you to like not look and
Mhm.
not do
Mhm.
anything. But the victim is asking you to share in that burden of pain with them. They're actually saying, "Hey, look at this thing." It's hard for people to do, and so it's much easier to take the side of the perpetrator in that regard. And healing doesn't actually happen until you have it's a trauma is a disconnection really from people and from the community, and until you have that connection, that seeing, that believing, that person sharing in the burden of pain. I always use Peter Levine's quote where
Mm.
trauma is not
Yeah.
what happens to us, but it happens inside of us in the absence of that empathetic witness. And I think that's the hardest thing. So the healing happens with that empathetic witness, with the person sitting there and sharing in that pain and suffering with you. There's really nothing that can be healing until we have that truth and reconciliation,
Yeah.
period, and the acknowledgement of what happened. I think it's really important that people realize, just believe survivors, sit with them,
Yeah.
share in that with them. You're actually part of the perpetration if you're questioning, minimizing, trying to cover up, trying to hide, telling you to empathize with them, telling you to get over. Yeah, now you're actually part of the perpetration. So be
Yeah.
a part
And
of the healing.
don't talk
Yeah,
about them behind their back because when it comes back to them,
exactly.
it's horrific. It is so hard if you've had somebody that you trusted, knows your whole story, and then you receive a phone call saying that this person said this, this, and this, and this, and is not believing you anymore. Like, it is horrifying hard to deal with. I mean, the best thing that you can do, nobody goes to the police and divulges horrific details for the fun of it. Nobody does that.
Mhm.
And it's so hard to
Mhm.
get that through to people who have never gone through this, that people just don't do that. People don't go to the police and unravel things for just the sake of it. Right? It's just we don't do that. The other thing
Mhm.
that I wanted to talk to you about was memories and how as you start sitting down and start expressing this and how memories can unfold in your opinion and everything that you have studied in your whole wide range of expertise is is it possible for memories to always continue unraveling the more that you hold and acknowledge what you've gone through?
Yes, absolutely. So I think about memories, a lot of times they're very fragmented,
Hmm.
and especially if there's dissociation and if you've been in that kind of mind control, thought reform environment. So they're not kind of clear memories. So a lot of times they're, like I said, they're trauma in childhood. It forms and it deforms the personality. That's what Dr. Herman says. So I think that's really hard. I know, like in the ethics, in as for psychologists, memory work is very forbidden. It's very unethical, which is to try to get people to remember things.
Yep.
There was quite a lot of well, it's really hard. Like I was on Shalisa's podcast, Cults to Consciousness, and I said something about recovered memories. And I think, that upset her because a lot of perpetrators use that as saying, oh no, this therapist has planted these memories in that person's head. So they use that to disbelieve the survivors. But I certainly wasn't talking about memories that sort of are naturally occurring and that
Hmm.
occur over time and more gets unraveled. Um, I'm talking about the actual act of doing memory work and trying to,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's very unethical. But yes, absolutely, that's very, very common for memories to come because a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to think about it, right? So
Hmm.
we just don't go there. And then when you finally sort of allow yourself, then sometimes you'll just get this kind of, floodgate of all these
Yeah.
memories starting to come back. A lot of people, when they have kids and their children are that same age, so I think seeing the world through your children's eyes sometimes, and you're sort of seeing how vulnerable and how much you're protecting them. And my beautiful friend Carolyn Ansley, she was on a podcast and she said she's doctor, medical doctor in New Zealand, and she's talked about her 7-year-old son was kind of like dancing and wanting her attention, but her 7-year-old self needed that love and attention too. And they were sort of like vying for her. And I just thought that was so beautiful because I think that's quite a common experience is that
Hmm.
raising our children can bring back memories of what happened,
Hmm.
in that
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
and an understanding of how inappropriate they were and
Yeah.
how could anyone ever allow a child to go through that,
Yeah.
like it's a really overwhelming thing. So I
Hmm.
think it's really important to get a good therapist,
Yeah,
good,
I
I'd say a
agree.
registered
Yeah.
health professional as much as possible that has
Hmm.
good ethics and to unravel some of these things when you're going through it.
Yeah. And I think I just wanted to explain to people that if anybody's suffering and they're questioning this, that yes, that it doesn't, it can come back when we disassociate. Our nervous system tucks all that away. And the more regulation or the more grounded you become, and the more that you allow yourself to be able to really sit down and process this, is the more things start coming back together. It's like recovering your memories as they were folded up. Would that be a good way to say it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes in stages as well.
Yeah.
There's different parts in our brain and different types of memories as well. Yeah, I think it's really important that you have that support with someone, and safety is the most important thing. So finding someone that you feel really safe with, that's way more important than uncovering all of these. Like Gilly,
Hmm.
what you were saying, going to the police is like therapy without any resolve or support. It's not therapy, I'll say that. That's the opposite of
No.
therapy. Yeah, therapy, it should never just be about just, going through all of these things that overwhelm your nervous system and finding out all these details. That's usually really, really bad therapists that do that. Sometimes as psychologists, like it takes years for someone to even get to the place where they're regulated enough, um, to actually be able to see, to actually look into some of these memories without it completely destroying and overwhelming their nervous system. And it's a massive privilege to be so deeply into someone's like psyche and feeling like it. There's like it's not a place for anyone to come and force you to tell your story or before you're ready. Um, Safety and a sense of positive regard, like someone really, really trusts and believes in you, and there's this constant regard. Like that is the most important thing, and it can take years to build that before you can even start to delve in. And I think as oh, you see these horrible events all the time come and do this trauma thing, and they go for a weekend, and I think sometimes as cult survivors we feel, I mean, the exclusive brethren might be a bit different. I'll be interested to hear this, but we feel like we need to have this massive catharsis, this huge, overwhelming experience to heal. But sometimes it can be even worse, like where you're constantly activating your nervous system. And I've seen, court cases going for these places that force people to kind of have these bring up all these traumatic memories, and it's unsafe, and there's all these people around you, and
Mhm.
um, it's really bad. Like good trauma therapy is so slow. It's comforting, it's warming, it's healthy, it regulates you. And there's not that there isn't really intense moments, but it's like going to the gym. You don't lift, 200 kilos on your first day. It's a slow thing of being able to actually to get to that
Mhm.
position.
Yeah. And I think it's
Yeah.
important people recognize that therapy, when you enter into therapy for something like this, it's not, you're not just going in for a couple months. Like this is a lifelong journey of unraveling, because the more that you mature and the more you create that safe space is the more that your nervous system allows another unraveling. But the nervous
Mhm.
system, as we know it, works very, very slow. It is one of those things, and you don't want to rush it. I mean, I have had episodes where I have rushed it, and it is not a pretty sight. It's not a pretty sight. I do. I am the first one to, I am guilty of trying to just get through this, because you get tired. You get
Mhm.
tired of the exhaustion of opening something like this up, and then your whole world changes around you. Everything changes around you when you start talking about this, because everything that you are hiding from is now become invisible. The triggers seem to be
Mhm.
there more. The people around you that you were tolerating before just kind of seem intolerable now. You start recognizing who is supporting you, who isn't supporting you. There is an upheaval that comes along with it, but it is a good upheaval. The key is take your time. Be slow, be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, and make sure that your therapist is someone that creates a safe space for you when you're having your therapy appointments.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yes.
that's why I wanted to cover that in the study that I sent you, because people are like, "Oh, come heal your nervous system, come recovery," this quick fix. And I think we all want that. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so like, oh, if I could take a pill and it was all gone, that would be amazing.
Hmm.
But when it's especially developmental trauma, not just like PTSD, but CPTSD, where your own family members, all the people around you were part of that harm, it is a lifelong thing. Like you have developmental trauma. It's never going to go away in that sense, but you can definitely live a good, healthy, hopeful life. But I did define recovery as a multifaceted process of healing, personal growth, and identity integration for individuals of cultic environments. Critically, it's not reintegration, because these individuals in the cloistered world experience a fundamental lack of prior integration within themselves, their communities, and the broader society. So it's integration for the first time. Recovery, therefore, encompasses not only individual healing, but also the complex and often challenging journey of establishing these crucial connections. So I think that's really important. For me, that's what recovery looks like. It's that I can, I have people around me that matter to me. I've got some sort of meaning in my life. I've got, I can get out of bed, like recovery is I can function in the way that I want to. I can meet those goals. It's not about, I'm not going to have these feelings anymore. I'm not going to and I do a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy as well with people, where you're kind of focusing on value systems, and then you're not focusing on reducing, but you're focusing more on finding meaning and purpose in that experience. And then naturally the symptoms sort of reduce over time. But if you're focusing just on get rid of it, I don't like this anymore, like that can create more trauma. To kind of have that hyper focus of, which is a culty thing, isn't it? It's like push those out of your head. It's demon, it's evil, it's bad. Like that's one way to go absolutely insane. I could say is to like try to be so terrified by those thoughts and feelings and to try to get rid of them and rebuke them and all of that. So it's more of the acceptance of that and acceptance of the lifelong journey that it will be and connecting yourself like it is that connection with people around you.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out, isn't it, that like a physical wound will your body reacts in a way that it will heal, or it'll close over something. But a lot of the times when we're dealing with trauma, the mind's way of dealing with it is to brush over it, and is to close it off, and to completely try and shut it away. And there's more when you're talking about memories, and it's your body will try and block those memories out because it's a trauma response that your body doesn't want to remember it. For me recently, it was when it went to the police and my abuser denied it all. That was the point where a lot more memories started coming vivid for me, because I thought, well, how can you deny it? Because I can remember this. I can remember this specific detail. I can remember the details in the bedroom. I can remember the details in the car. I can remember the places where you would pull the car over. How can you deny that? But all of a sudden, what's happening then is you're remembering all those specific details that I came out with it in therapy, and my therapist turned to me and said, "Do you realize you haven't actually disclosed those specific details before?" Because your body's response is to brush over it, because you don't want to go down that route of specifics. So I think it's just important for people to realize that it's a normal response for your body to block out those memories. Unless you're in an environment where, say with a therapist, that you can safely unpack them and actually work through them in a way that's going to help you to heal from them. But you've got to be able to do it in a safe way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important. It's funny, when I was in Africa doing that missionary work, there was a little girl that picked up something like a coal from the fire, and she didn't get her hand, she didn't get antibiotics or her hand cleaned out. And so it ended up becoming so infected that she had to remove her arm. And it's just such a tragic thing. But I think we say time heals all wound all the time. And it's like, well, we know that time does not heal wounds. We know that wounds will fester and they'll get infected. And that's the same, I think, with the mind. Your time does not heal your mind. And even if you're not kind of remembering, your body remembers, just like, the body keeps the score. But then also, When the Body Says No is a really good book as well, Dr. Mate, but Gabor Mate. And he talks about how it shows up in our lives, that it shows up maybe when we're not really acknowledging where it's coming from. It could, and there's a lot of the research that I've sent you through. It shows up in impacting our relationships, in our self-harm to ourselves, in substance abuse, in ongoing somatic issues like fibromyalgia, health issues. Like the numbers, I put it with kind of like the US and Australia CDC, like the numbers are staggering staggering in every one of those areas for the SGAs and the cult survivors that I studied. And so just because it's not kind of front of mind, it doesn't mean that it's not happening within you at all the times. And Luke Hollis, he did his dissertation on males as well, who'd experienced sexual abuse. And of course, there's that added layer of stigma there. And yeah, he talked about, the substance abuse and the harms and the anger and all of these things that were sort of happening until they had disclosed and they finally had an opportunity to get that support that they needed. And it's a really powerful thing. I think it's important to not kind of have that whole time heals everything. I have people in their 80s that are like bawling their eyes out about one experience they had, and at Boys Town or something when they were a kid. And I think, yeah, that's a misconception, but I do understand it is a coping mechanism. Like, you can't be living in this all the time. It's like, put it on the back burner until the house is on fire, and then you're like, whoa, I have to actually do something with it. So yeah, I'd really encourage people to disclose to someone you love, someone near you. Just tell them. Just tell someone that you trust, and then get them to help you find those support and resources. That it can be just so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll have a link below in the description of this podcast with some of the stuff Maria has sent me. So Maria's done some studies and she's got some excellent resources that, we could do this podcast for 4 hours, but I think what we'll do is maybe we'll let this podcast go out and then wait a little bit. We'll come back to it again and maybe go into another layer of it, a little deeper layer. Because I know that most of the people that watch our podcast that we really do this for is for the insiders. And this is a lot of information for the insiders to sit with. But I do think, if I come back to when we're talking about acceptance, for myself, the hardest thing for me to sit with every single time in therapy is acceptance. It is just hard for me to accept that what happened to me happened to me. It's hard for me to accept that the people that were supposed to love me put me in an environment that obviously they didn't know any better, but still, it is a betrayal. It is a deep betrayal that we have to learn how to accept. And also the acceptance that this stuff exists on this planet still and is still being covered up. We still do not have a judicial system that prioritizes victims over perpetrators. That is the most saddest thing about all of this, is that the victims are questioned more in their disclosure than a perpetrator. And that is what is sad. Because I firmly believe, yes, there probably is people out there that are backstabbing people and creating, outrageous stories. But when you sit and talk to a survivor, you feel it. Like, you feel it. Like, the first time I ever talked to Gilly, like, you feel it. I have people that talk to me all the time about their abuse. And they can be on the other side of the world and I'm having a conversation with them. It goes straight through my heart. Like, you feel another's pain when you've been through it yourself. I wished that those that have not experienced this are taught more through the way we live on how to support, how to accept, how to hold space. The most cancerous thing that you can ever do to a survivor is be dismissive, is to question them, is to say, well, that didn't happen because of this. It is not up to anybody else but the survivor and how their body is allowing this to unfold. I was the house on fire. I used to have blackouts all the time and reenact stuff. And what my husband has had to live through is horror. I didn't want to deal with this. I just did not want to deal with this. My very first therapist I went to, she knew right off the bat that I had been sexually abused. And of course, I kind of shoved it under the ground. I'm like, yes. And I immediately went, but I want to talk about this. So it wasn't until recently that I was able to open up this can of worms. It does come later in life because, like you say, time doesn't heal. Instead, the monkeys burst out of their cages and they're all screaming around the room, and you have no choice but to deal with this. And the body does not lie. I mean, for me, therapy has taught me to get into the body, find it's about holding the horror inside the body. It's not even about the memories of the brain. It's about the memories of the body, because you cannot deny what's housed in here. You cannot deny what is held in here. When you have a good therapist that takes you into your body, it just unravels. It unravels. It's right there before your eyes. The feelings, the emotions, the smells, the sensory on every single level. But there is a container for it. Yes, it is hard to walk through, but there is a container for it. My biggest thing that I guess trying to convey here is acceptance. It's learning how to accept that what could happen happened, and that what did happen happened. And getting a therapist to stop gaslighting yourself, because that will always continue. I mean, I've been at therapy for a long time. I still gaslight myself and be like, I know it's true, but you don't want it to be true, because if it is true, then that means I have to really hold that pain once again, and I don't want to go through that again. But it does happen a different way when you do pick it up, if you have a good therapist.
And also
Yeah,
accepting that, a perpetrator can be, and a lot of the times is, someone that's in a position of trust and someone that's close to
Yeah.
you. There's a stat of child sexual abuse victims, 93% know their abusers. So just because you know them and they're someone that you trust and someone that's close to you, doesn't mean it's not abuse. It is, regardless of whether you know them or not. It's so important to realize that, oh well, it's a family member, so it can't, they can't be doing something wrong. They absolutely can. And a lot of the time, like I say, people who are in a position of trust, they completely twist that trust. From my personal experience, someone that was essentially a caregiver for me in when I was young, to then go from that, someone that I wanted to be around, someone that I enjoyed being around, to go from that to the horrific stuff that was then carried out as someone that was in a position of trust. And I think that's one of the hardest things that people struggle to come to terms with, is how can that, how can you go from that position of care and that position of someone that you enjoy spending time with, someone that makes you happy, someone that does all these things for you in life, and then suddenly to realize that actually they've completely and utterly betrayed that trust and used it to their advantage. It's just so important for people to realize that it doesn't matter who it is. It may well still be abuse.
Yes, yeah. It's such a good point. And I think society doesn't want to hear about that. And like we've got Daniel Morecambe, who's a young boy who was abducted and harmed and ended up being murdered. And his family, they have the stranger danger campaigns, and they're constantly at schools. Like you said, it's such a tiny, tiny portion of people that are harmed and abused is a stranger that just abducts them. But they get all these awards and accolades and everyone inviting them to speak, whereas someone talking about harms within your own communities, they get shunned and shamed and lied about, because I think the world's not ready for that. They don't want to know that that person that looks like an amazing person in the outside world is actually harming close people to them. I think it kind of touches on that kind of fear and vulnerability. But yeah, it's a really good point. Like it's almost always someone within our networks, someone within a position of power over us. And I love Brene Brown's quote. It's one of my favorites where she says, if you put shame in a petri dish and you cover it with judgment, silence, and secrecy, you've created the perfect environment for shame to grow, and it makes its way into every corner and crevice of your life. If, on the other
Wow.
hand, you put shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, shame loses all of its power and it begins to wither. Empathy creates a hostile environment for shame, an environment that it can't survive in because shame needs you to believe that you're alone and that it's just you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm.
I do think that's a big thing when you come out with it. You feel so alone. I mean, I've done therapy over that of just how alone I feel. And I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. But there's just this, it's there all the time. And my therapist says the same thing, that it is, when you feel that aloneness is like, how can you offer yourself some compassion? Who around you can offer you some empathy so that shame can dissipate?
Mhm.
It is the love. I mean, the hardest lesson we'll ever learn is how to give ourselves the love that we want to give everybody else. And how can we give ourselves the empathy and compassion that we need in order to be able to maneuver and navigate some of these horrific things that we've gone through. Yeah. I think one of the last things that I want to talk about before we sign off here is how these high control groups are the perfect environment for these types of abuse to happen. And in all of in everything that you've gone through and studied, Maria, like in your opinion, why are these groups so high and hot with with sexual abuse?
Yeah, I think we've touched on that a little
We
bit
did.
already. It's like that constant need to comply to your elders and leaders all the time. They've usually got like a spiritual thing as well, where they're almost godlike, or so there's yeah, it's rife for that. Then there's that secrecy, the shame, that doctrine over the person. There, and I think I explained it really well in the inquiry submission. If anyone wants to watch it, where I just talk about all of the different um, places that stop people from telling, from the abuse to be uncovered, from the support to be offered after. It's that really wide. It is the perfect environment
Hmm.
of not
Hmm.
caring about the individual, that caring about the collective and the organization above anyone else.
Hmm.
And I think it's just simply too dangerous. That's why we really push for a child safe environments, and not waiting for all of these abuse, allegations to come out, but to actually be proactive in that. And just because, yeah, these environments they're petri dishes for, and they're, and that's why I kind of have a bit of an issue as well with the everyone's a victim in a cult, because I know that a lot of perpetrators actually go into cultic groups because they can get away with a
Hmm.
lot more. There's that forgiveness, and there's like no retribution, and as long as like in the one that I grew up in, if you questioned the leader, you'd be like in trouble. And but if you raped a kid, it's like, oh well, just ask for forgiveness. So
Yeah.
it's just so crazy. It's like if you're not complying with the leadership demands, so that it's messed up. It is, the whole environment is just, the priorities are completely wrong.
Yeah.
They're
There's a lot of
toxic.
spiritual gaslighting that goes on, isn't
Yeah.
there? Like it's that gaslighting of, well, if he confesses his sin, then it's all
Mhm.
forgiven. It's all forgiven.
Mhm.
Or lately it's like, Cheryl, why are you doing what you're doing? Like Jesus heals all. All this will be forgiven.
Mhm.
Just go to Jesus and Jesus will heal you. Like you
Mhm.
can't apply a band-aid like that in the context that you're giving it to me to a situation like this. You just simply can't. No, that's not how we change the planet. That's not how we change how we live down here, is just by applying those band aids. And it is very demeaning and diminishing to say that to a survivor. It's just very irritating when you get all this spiritual gaslighting that happens. Here's a clip of Maria and Miriam in Victoria at the Parliament discussing cultic groups.
I'm here as a registered psychologist. I've got a significant training and lots of experience for over a decade in complex trauma, coercive control, cultic abuse. And most importantly, I'm also a survivor of the Children of God, which is now called the Family International. So today I really want to focus the discussion on developmental disadvantages experienced by children born into cults, because children really are regularly forgotten in the conversation. A lot of times people are asking, why do people join cults? But that's actually the wrong question. And the majority of the people in cults, I would say, are children. So the question we need to ask is, what impact does being raised in a totalistic and authoritarian environment have on the development of a child? So using terms like recruitment and membership in the context of children is not semantic. It's actually a primary barrier to protection. The language incorrectly assigns agency to a child, misclassifying a child protection crisis as a religious or a lifestyle choice. The committee must maintain a clear distinction between adults and children through this inquiry, recognizing children's particular rights and protections and vulnerabilities. And this includes yesterday's children, the ones who are living with severe challenges today or they're ending their lives. The consequences of this are immediate and devastating. I personally have lost family members to suicide. I've also had to support 5 of my closest siblings and peers just in the last 2 months with psychiatric care. 2 attempted to end their lives. In a study, cult child survivors reported to personally knowing 6.8 people who had suicide and 6.5 who had an early death, 14.8 who had attempted suicide and not completed. All of these children were born into the cult. I know the scope of the inquiry has been quite broad. When I say cult, I am using Langone's definition. It's an absolutist ideology that it dictates harsh physical discipline or the rejection of medical intervention. It's a closed and physically isolated society, often, or maybe mentally. Also, religious beliefs to justify ideology and their reclusive nature. So there's a lot of times rationalization for child abuse, as well as limited interaction with mainstream society members who could be protective. To be clear, this is not religious trauma or abuse, this is institutional abuse. So to try to make it simple, I'm just going to compare an average Australian child, and of course there's a lot that grow up with traumatic, but I'm just going to compare what you might think an average and a cult child. So 2 children suffer sexual abuse, which is very common in cults. Some of my peers, I think it's over 77%. The Jehovah's Witness and Exclusive Brethren, over 50% from Dr. Mitten's work. So a non-cult child, while traumatized, they can potentially rely on established social and legal infrastructure. A cult child is denied all of these infrastructures to support their recovery. So an average child might be able to get support from their parents, their peers. They might even understand some of this abuse. In a cult, family structures are destroyed. Parents are enforcers, they're not protectors. Survivors who speak up, they're shamed and shunned. At 8, my mother told me to pick my nose to turn off a perpetrator rather than intervening. Moral structures, most children know right and wrong. They have a framework to contextualize the abuse. In a cult, there's a lack of moral reference system. The way I grew up, sexual assault was actually deemed as godly. And in purity culture, a lot of times it's the child's fault. Protective figures like teachers, public awareness, community and support. There could be empathy and recognition. A cult child, there's no protective factors. And after leaving, a lot of times they're stigmatized, they're disbelieved. Worse yet, many of us will never tell anyone we grew up in a cult. And I know a lot of people that have a completely secret life. In fact, that was me 1 year ago. Anka was the one, I call her the midwife. She brings all our stories out, so you'll talk to her. But I was terrified for 20 years to even tell anyone because of the stigma and the shame and because we get targeted. Loaded language in cults, there's a jargon. Basically, a cult child would learn loaded language, and it's difficult to actually communicate with other people. For us, sex was called sharing. So if I were to go to the police and said, an uncle shared with me, that wouldn't make any sense to them, but it was child rape. There's legal precedents, there's justice, and there's redress. For a cult child, legal recourse is nearly non-existent. There's also aggressive lawfare by the cult a lot of times, an entire institution against a child or a young person, decades-long statutes of limitations. There's also psychological support. There might be modalities about child sexual abuse for psychologists. The cult child, there's hardly any professional recovery framework. Psychologists a lot of times have no training in cult-related trauma or its developmental consequences. And a sense of identity. Most children have a sense of where they've come from. They're Australian, there's a sense of who they are, safety and structure. A cult child doesn't have any of that. They miss childhood development stages. They lack a sense of belonging, even knowing who they are. They have minimal shared commonalities with the outside world, and support networks are very difficult. So when you compare these two cases, the differences to available support are vast. Cult-born survivors experience multiple and compounding traumas: sexual, physical, emotional, developmental, social, educational, and medical neglect. In a final act of violence, many times they're excommunicated or shunned for even speaking up.
And I'll add the link to the full video below in the description so that you guys can watch the whole thing. Okay, so you have a lot of things going on, Maria. Let's get into places that people can find you, people that can join you in doing things. What do you all have going on right now?
So obviously there's the Olive Leaf Network. We've never received any funding at all, but hoping to apply for some grants. And so in that we do aid, advocacy, and awareness. Those are our three mission statements, goals. So yes, part of the inquiry into cults and fringe groups. We're constantly writing submissions to all sorts of different things, child safety, and it really covers. So if anyone's interested in writing submissions and helping us into government inquiries, that would be amazing, or volunteering their services. Another thing we have really exciting that's coming up is a Stories That Stir collaboration with the Olive Leaf Network. So they've got a really great model where it's kind of like a TED Talk, but more for, like I said, like that empathy in the Petri dish of, helping people tell their stories in their way, in the trauma-informed way. And so those events the first one's on the 29th, coming out in Brisbane at the Salisbury Food Shed. I can put the details down the bottom. And we've got some really amazing speakers. One did grow up in the Peebs, and then she went into Mormonism, and she does say, Mormonism was the cakewalk compared to the Peebs because it is just so high control. So there's some Jade Struess, who had lost her little sister Elizabeth to the medical neglect and an occultic group called the Saints in Queensland. So she's navigating all of that. Her family has gone to jail, and the cult leader, and just some incredible speakers that are going to be coming along. So if you're near to Brizzy, I'd say come, and I think it's going to be an incredible day. And that's on a Sunday. And then if you would like to speak, we've still got some spots available for our ones in Northern Rivers. And then we've also got Sydney in May, and in June in Melbourne. We'll be doing these events. So they might be videoed as well. I know ABC is coming along, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. It's just our time. It's like our Me Too movement, I think. It's our time to like speak out and say, hey, this is real. This is happening. It's happening
Yeah.
now. And like you said, going to bed every night, just thinking with that urgency of what can we do? I want, before I die, I want to have changed something and left the world a better place. So I feel that
Yeah.
really strongly with you, Cheryl. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gilly, is there anything left that you want to say?
I think one of the things that came on earlier was the understanding for people who are talking to, or people who are listening to survivors, is to understand the thing that so many things that can be a trigger in terms of, like we've already spoken about, the sensory things. But it could be the smell of a perfume, or the smell of a room, or the sight of something that's in a room, or the way someone moves, the way someone touches you. And understanding survivors and listening to survivors, when if they tell you something, just believe them, and believe that the way they're reacting isn't by choice. It's not something they're dramatizing. It's something that is truly causing a reaction, and just helping them in whatever way it is, just to desensitize from that moment. We all have our own ways of desensitizing, and there's lots of ways that therapists teach us to do it, but just believing the survivors, because the thing in society seems to be, like we've already spoken about, the instant doubt. When a survivor speaks out, is instant doubt. It's like, or there's a reason why they were abused. Even even like rape victims, or what was she wearing?
What was she wearing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that a question?
Yeah.
Why the fuck is that a question? There is absolutely zero reason for that question to come up. I've had it recently. Someone was talking about me to someone else, and they're making out that there was an issue. It was an issue with me because I'd been sexually abused. Oh, sorry, did I ask for it? Was it something? Is it? How does that make me a bad person? I'm a survivor. It's just so infuriating when people somehow twist it, somehow turn it around, that you're either not believed, or you're painted out to be part of the problem.
Yeah.
It's just
Or
so
there's
powerful.
so many comments on how you're dealing with it, right? Or how you, like, it's so disappointing. It was just so disappointing to hear what people say behind the scenes. And I'm like, this is not helping, and this is not how we're going to make change. So, I mean, I've just really realized that, boundaries are coming into place, and I simply just don't have those people in my life anymore. I still get reports back, and that hurts, but I am grateful that I don't have these people in my life anymore that I allowed into my life before. But please just watch how you're talking about someone who has come forward about abuse, because there are ears around you, and those ears could be somebody who's been abused, and you are the reason why they don't come and disclose what happened to them. We just need to watch how we are communicating. We need to watch how we are talking. We need to be diligent in creating the change that we need. And it starts in our home. It starts with the people that we're talking about abuse survivors too. It's just super important to be cognitive of what you are saying in front of other people.
Because also when the abuse victim or survivor comes forward, their self-esteem or self-worth will already be on the floor.
Yeah.
The last thing they need is someone else pushing them down from, like you say, comments that they're disbelieving or comments that somehow it was that they were responsible. It is so important how we listen and how we talk to survivors, because it has taken so much, a majority of the time, it has taken them so much to come out with it and to come forward with it. Like you said earlier, Cheryl, the thing of, the common thing with disbelief is, why are they coming out with it now? Or why, what's this all about? Why are they saying this? Do you really think we would make this shit up?
Exactly.
Do you think we're that desperate for attention that we would disclose this kind of information about ourselves? Why the fuck would we want to do that out of choice? There's absolutely zero reason for anyone to want that information to be out in the public about themselves.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah, I just say, like, when a survivor comes forward, like, are you going to be on the side of the perpetrator, or are you going to be on the side of the victim? Like, you choose. Are you going to douse that petri dish with more shame, or are you going to douse it with some empathy to take the shame away? So it's a responsibility for all of us, for the systems, for the therapists, for the like, every single person holds a responsibility to either support that perpetrator or to support the person, the victim who's come forward. So it's no one does this because their attention. Well, I mean, maybe someone does, I'm not sure, but like Cheryl said, you can tell really clearly.
You
when
feel it.
there's
You just
truth.
feel it.
You feel it
Yeah.
in your bones, like that.
Yeah.
And the details as well. The details that you had, Cheryl, were just like amazing. No one could possibly come up with a story like that.
It's so hard. And for me, like, I haven't done a podcast on what really happened to me anywhere. And there is when you finally bring it out and you vocalize it publicly and it's out there, there's just this bearing of the soul that happens. And when it is witnessed and when it is accepted and validated, there is this level of healing that I cannot even explain to you that what happens. But the thing is that I have so many details of what happened to me because it lives in my freaking body that if I wished I could bring it. I wished I could have that level of healing from the public. And I mean, Maria, you're going to understand this. Gilly, you understand this. You understand what I'm talking about when you finally unzip the body and you let it talk, right? But I don't feel there's a safe place for me to do that yet. I just don't. I hope one day I do. I am starting to put my thoughts down for a book. But again, it's even hard to do it on there because I'm still and I don't want that. I want to be able to be free in explaining what I need to explain because people need to understand of what exists on this planet. But yes, as much as it is not very palatable for human consumption, we need to consume it. Otherwise, change is not made. I've said it before in another podcast. We sit down and we watch these gory movies. I mean, I have to really watch what I read and what I watch because it's just, I'm a very triggerable person. And I lost my train of thought. It's important that we learn how to create a space for these types of things to be there so that we can understand what really is going on. That's how change is happening. And coming back to what you said, Gilly, or Maria, what you were talking about of how you're either supporting the perpetrator or you're supporting the survivor. I actually just recently sent a letter to my parents. It probably is the last one I'll ever send them. It was a letter that I laid out a boundary of, you either are supporting Ellen or you are supporting me. There is no gray area. It's black or white.
Yeah.
It is either Ellen or it is me. If I do not hear from you, then I know you're supporting Ellen, and please remove me off of. I am no longer your daughter. My children are no longer your grandchildren, and that is the price that you have to pay for choosing to side with my perpetrator. I don't care if you're in a cult or you're not in a cult. As a mother, you should have some sort of a gumption, some sort of a reaction that says, I want to take care of my child, whether she is 3 years old or whether she's 51 years old. That's where I drew the line. And I never heard back. So again, you go back to grief therapy and you start working through the grief and you're reliving it all over again. But in this time, it is a much different way. I am grieving them and grieving my family with gratitude to what they all taught me, gratitude to the special times we did have, but grieving the horrific, horrific loss of the side they chose. It is just a very hard pill to swallow. Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't think it's good or right for therapists to push anyone into reconnecting with family, or
No.
it's really unethical. And I see that happen quite often. Empathize with your family; they're just victims as well. Your parents are deceived, and it's like, well, no one cuts off their family, just like to Gilly's thing. Like, why are you asking that question? We don't cut off our family. We're not being indoctrinated by a cult leader or whatever. Like, yes, people do that sometimes because they're under coercive control. But when at the time that you've been hurt and hurt and hurt and hurt and hurt, like at some point you just have to say, this is not worth it for me and my
Yeah.
life and my kids, and like I can't do this anymore. Like, and I have seen family members, I think it's that complete lack of that attachment, really. It's
Yeah.
quite a scary thing to be with someone who's instant, like my mom told me, oh, just pick your nose to turn off my perpetrator, rather than actually being, fuck no, I'm gonna go and stop this right now. And I have to be like, do I want this person who's harmful to me in my life, and who and constantly creates that harm, who keeps putting more shame in the petri dish? Or do I want to actually say, you know what, enough's enough. I'm putting in a good boundary here. That assertive
Yeah.
anger skills is probably one of the most healthy things that you can
Yeah.
do. And so yeah, if a therapist is pushing you in family reconnection or whatever, then they're not doing the right
Yeah.
thing. Like everyone's
Yeah.
journey is so different, and it's
Yeah.
completely up to them. They have
Yeah.
to be in the center of their life and decisions. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've been so blessed with my therapist, like so blessed with my therapist. Like I can't even, it is a journey to find the therapist that you need. But when you find that therapist, oh man, like it's like a puzzle piece that just fits together. And the healing that you'd always been looking for is starting to come. And you start realizing that this is just 6 therapy sessions and we're done. You realize that this is a lifelong journey, because as you mature and grow, so do your layers of healing. Yeah.
So true.
Thank you, Gilly. Thank you, Maria, so, so much. And thank you to everyone that has taken the time to listen to this. If you stuck through this long, thank you. It is conversations that need to happen. These are things that we need to look at. And please, please try and find as many resources you can to help yourself understand how to support victims. If you are a victim of yourself, there will be a bunch of numbers at the end of this podcast for you to reach out to. Maria, is there an email? Do you have a way for people to reach out to you? Do you want them just to reach out to you through Olive Leaf Network?
Yeah, the Olive Leaf Network's probably the best way to go.
Okay.
So we've just got an email. We don't have a phone anymore because we
Yeah.
all work full time, and I've got kids with
Exactly.
disabilities,
Yeah.
and like this
Yeah.
is just a side thing that we're doing. So hopefully
Yeah.
in the future, if we get some more eyes on
Yeah.
it, and the government thinks it's worthwhile, we'll get some funding. But you can definitely reach out. You've got a lot of people who have been through what you've been through. You're not alone. You're never, never alone. So yeah, I just wanted to send that out to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the Olive Leaf Network email address and website. And just so everybody knows, at the end of every podcast, you'll always find the resources to Olive Leaf Network. You find it below in the description on every single podcast. We referred to Jill Abby Mitten's research that she did earlier, and the link to the full video will be below in the description. Here's the poem that Maria is referring to that I wrote a while ago. It's called Unzip My Body. Unzip my body. I want to unzip my body right here, right now, in front of you, in front of the jury, in front of every person who ever asked, "Are you sure it happened? Why didn't you say something sooner? Do you have proof?" No, I don't have proof. I have a body that remembers every inch of those hands. I have skin that flinches when the air shifts just right. I have a rib cage that tightens like it still knows the weight of silence. If you want proof, let me unzip my body. Let me peel back the flesh, reveal the places they touched before I even had words for what they were stealing. Let me show you the ache that lodged itself between my legs before I knew how to say stop. I will show you the truth screaming in my nervous system, the courtroom carved into every tendon, every tremor. Don't ask for tidy stories. Don't ask for police reports from a time I couldn't spell my own name. Ask my hips why they lock up in the dark. Ask my stomach why it turns when I hear footsteps behind me or change jingling in a pocket. Ask my body. It kept the minutes when no one else would. This isn't about believing me anymore. It's about believing in justice. Justice that doesn't wait for a perfect victim or a time-stamped photo. It's about holding children like sacred fire, too precious to risk, too human to doubt, too valuable to silence. If I unzip my body, let it spill every unspoken truth, then zip it back up with steel thread and fire. It's not to prove myself. It's not for your belief. It's for the ones still silent, for the ones still hoping someone will listen, for the justice we still haven't seen, for the children who should never have to unzip theirs just to be protected. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Much love to you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Cheryl. Take care. Bye.
How can you support Get a Life podcast? We are currently raising funds for this legal lawsuit against Cheryl and the Get a Life podcast. Please check out the GoFundMe link in the description of this episode. Thank you to everyone who has donated. You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. Or you can scan the QR code on your screen that takes you to our GoFundMe. Every donation helps keep this project alive. If you are in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. You can find all our Get a Life merchandise on our website at www.getalife.net. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.